Oh, good morning, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. And it is indeed 10:30 sharp. So before we get started, I think it is good to, if I can finagle this, do a little bit of a virtual town hall protocol. Just because to help facilitate access to the sound. So if you could, while we're doing the presentation, and when other people are talking, if you can mute your phones and or your microphones, so that we have maximum noise. We've already informally said hi to one another, but feel free to use the chat box to kind of say hi and tell us which intersection or forum you represent. And there we go. Nikki has already put something in. So if everybody can kind of see, so we can have a good sense of who is here. We already started that informally. Brian A.S. Dudley is here. Excellent, Ryan, Olga. And so while you do that, excellent. I wanted to just kind of say what we're going to do is a brief presentation, just to kind of as an overview of our topic today, which is our community of practices. And but also feel free to type questions in the chat box along the way, and we'll make sure to keep track of them, because sometimes you may think of something that you don't want to wait till the very end, so feel free to do that.
This is Lexi Barrett. I don't have a chat box on my app. There's no chat box.
Okay, in that case, I would recommend that you jot down your questions and then you can ask them at the end.
Okay, will do.
Is that okay? All right. Everybody ready? The agenda's coming, Liz. I'm Esther de Jong, I'm the new president for this year. Very delighted and honored to be in this role. And wanted to just welcome you to this town hall. The town hall is something that we've been doing since last year in an effort to increase and improve the communications between the board and the intersections. And so this is just one medium that we're using to stay connected and make sure that we're moving forward together. So today, in terms of who is participating, as you've already seen in the chat box, we have numerous intersection leaders. We have a few forum leaders. We have a couple of board members. You may have noticed, let's see, Sylvia was here, Kyun Suk is here, Leslie Barrett is here, Dudley Reynolds, past president, is here. Who am I missing? I think that's it for the board. And then from the TESOL staff, I wanted to note that Michelle Kim is our wonderful facilitator. Sarah Saar is here as well as the director for professional learning, and John Sagoda is on the line, as well as our new executive director, Christopher Powers. I'm very glad that they're here as well. So what we're going to try to do today is...
And Deborah Cruzan, Esther.
Ah, Deborah. Welcome, Deborah. Thank you for being there too. Didn't mean to overlook you. So if everybody's muted, here's our agenda. So we already kind of started our welcome and introductions. I want to take just a little bit of time to provide a little background to the intersection restructuring proposal, as we've been working on it for the last couple of years. I want to take a little bit of time talking about what feedback you as intersection leaders and forums have already provided, and then really dive in a little bit about the basic principles behind the documents that we sent you, the Community of Practice Policy and Procedure Manual. And if you haven't had a chance to do that, it would recommend that you, if you can, open up those documents, because I am not planning on reading through the documents, because I know that you've had the chance to already look at them, but I want to be able to reference them. So if that's something that you can do, that would probably be helpful. I want to start off by something really basic, and that's just terminology. As you may remember, the last time when you saw this proposal, it had KMBC in the title, referring to knowledge-based membership communities. That was an effort, I think, to show that we really are thinking about ourselves as professional learning communities within the association. But it was really clear when we talked to the intersection leaders that the notion of intersection was actually quite important. And for some of the intersections, almost like a branding piece, it's like, well, this is who we are. And so the request came back like, can we just keep intersections? So I just wanted to put out there that we absolutely listen to that, and we will use a more generic term, communities of practice, as kind of the overall way of talking about different membership groups within the association, and that intersection will be one type of community of practices. And we'll talk about the details of that, but I just wanted to kind of get that one out of the way so that, frankly, I don't have to keep saying KBMC, which I will struggle over if I have to say that too many times. So that being said, the background to what was the KBMC proposal, I wanted to just kind of run you through that a little bit, because sometimes we have new people coming in who were not necessarily part of the process from the very beginning. It's good to kind of remember that this is all part of a very long process of governance restructuring that TESOL as an association has gone through. And for those of you who've been part of this, you may remember that the final report of the very initial governance review was presented to the board in March of 2014. Okay, so that's 3 years ago. From that report, we had two task forces taking a more of an in-depth look at two pieces. One was the affiliate structure and the other one was the interest structure. And so the intersection task force did a tremendous job looking at what worked, what was challenging, and reported their findings last year at the convention. And we invited feedback from you online during that spring. And then, if you remember, we had a virtual town hall, in fact, on the exact same date as to date, a year ago. It was exactly the same, July 19th date. From that task force findings and the feedback that we got, we began to develop a proposal to begin to kind of say, okay, what does this look like when we talk about policies and procedure? And that proposal was presented in a virtual town hall in December of last year. And then again, we had a period of online feedback. We posted the document, invited feedback from December to February. And then we had another discussion about that proposal in Seattle in March of 2017. And that was a really important meeting. I don't know if for those of you who were there, I think it was really good to have that dialogue about, so what is it that this proposal is trying to accomplish? What is it that we want to do? And does it make sense? What are our concerns? And I think the intersection leaders made a number of really important points around, can we make sure that we're really clear about what the expectations are, what needs to be done, be really clear that this should not be an administrative overload for the intersections, and that whatever it is that we're doing kind of meets what we're trying to accomplish, right? With this whole restructuring process in the association, what we've been trying to do is really encourage strategic action, engaging with one another in ways that allow for flexibility and differences in response to trends and developments, and improving communication along the way. And so it's important that as we were thinking about any one of the restructuring pieces, that we think about that we want that strategic thinking, flexibility, and being able to be responsive and have rich opportunities for leadership. So we started with restructuring the standing committees to become the professional councils, and so their charge actually is very different than the standing committees at the time. And we're trying to really continue that consistently, and the same ideas behind the restructuring of the intersections to accomplish that same kind of thinking, allowing flexibility, allowing different ways of engaging with the association, with that goal of ultimately, creating this community together that we are as TESOL International Association. So based on that feedback, this is now the next town hall. We really take that, I just want to reiterate this one, we really took that very seriously. And really thought and worked very hard over the last months to come up with a product that listened and respected those concerns, and really tried to create a document that would allow us to talk about TESOL International Association and the membership communities within that as communities of practice, as really vibrant communities, membership communities, but not something that's driven by the board, but it's very much driven by the members themselves. So where we are today is with the two proposals, or the two pieces of information that we sent you. So you received a community of practice policy, and you received a community of practice procedure manual. For those of you who took a look at that, notice that the procedure manual says draft 8. We've really been revising and trying to improve on getting to a product that makes sense and that meets the criteria of involvement, engagement, and not being more cumbersome than it really needs to do. It has to serve you as much as it needs to serve us. So I want to highlight over the next couple of minutes, I want to highlight kind of 3 pieces of this, and then a few highlights on the policy and the procedure, and then really open it up for you to kind of put out your comments, your concerns. And as you're thinking about, presenting your concerns, we're very much open to hearing your solutions to those concerns as well. So what are we trying to do? I think one of the biggest shifts that we've tried to accomplish with this document is to really make clear to all of our members and membership communities that we are a very vibrant and an active professional community. There's not just one convention. We are professionals all year round, and we want to engage as professionals in a variety of different activities that support our members and that support the profession. And so we've tried to write this document as, in that sense, aspirational. We want all of the communities to be like that, the communities of practice. And we want to support communities to be the kind of community that makes sense to them. And that's why we distinguish between 2 different types of communities of practice, which will be next. And so what we're trying to do in this document is to say that really we see these community of practices as member-driven. So in other words, it's not the board telling the intersections what to do, because intersections are very capable of figuring that out. But we also want to make sure that what we do is we're all moving in the same direction. And so one of the things that I hope that you saw in the policy document, as well as in the procedure document, is that we really encourage the communities of practices themselves to initiate their goals and objectives and say, well, this is how it aligns with TESOL strategic plans, and really emphasize this notion of here are some general domains of what we think we can agree that a vibrant, active professional community could do, or what it looks like. But you can do the self-assessment. You can think about what does it look like for us, because we're very aware that it doesn't have to look the same for everybody. Then the third part that we're trying to accomplish here is to not have many different kinds of ways of being a community within TESOL. Right now we have the intersections are one kind of community. We have forums, which are another type of community. And it makes sense to us to say, well, let's have a communities of practice where we really have two different kinds of communities of practices. One is in the form of what we have called a professional learning community, and the other one is in the form of what we call an interest section. And those two, if you looked at the policy document, you could see that those vary particularly in terms of duration, intensity, and membership. So a PLN, a professional learning network, can be a community of practice that comes together for a very specific reason for a relatively short amount of time, or maybe a longer amount of time, whatever makes sense to the PLN, and may have any numbers of members that may be part of that PLN for a longer or shorter time. The whole idea here is that we recognize that sometimes communities of practices kind of develop and emerge in response to a particular event, for example, and then you need a group of people and they want to come together around that, but they don't necessarily is a need to continue beyond that. Sometimes there might be, and that's totally fine as well. And you've noticed in the procedure manual that the process of applying and continuing as that kind of community of practice is a little different between the PLN and the intersection, because intersections are more stable, if you will. There's a little bit of a different process involved. And then so what we wanted to make sure that we do is to bring the forums part of the integral structure of the TESOL communities of practice, and not have them be outside of our structure, but really have them be part of the structure. And so our proposal is for the forums to say, just like we offer this, and you noticed it for any of the intersection, you too, as a forum, can become a community of practice either as a PLN or an intersection. Yes. So what you have in front of you, or what you may have in front of you that you may have looked at, is the first one is the communities of practice policy. And that document really simply lays out what's the purpose of the communities of practice. And I think what I hope you saw there is that it is about an engaged community year-round that engages in both knowledge generating the functions as well as a community facilitative function of sharing information as well as providing feedback to the association and to the field. That document also lays out some guiding principles in terms of, the principles by which we like to operate these communities of practice, and those are the principles of trust, inclusivity, strategic alignment, and sustainability. Then, and the cultivation of leadership, sorry. Then we lay out the two different types the PLNs as informal discussion-based groups, and the intersections as specific areas of knowledge generation focused within the field. And then you see the last piece of that is the governance, which really kind of connects the procedure manual to how does that connect with the board of directors, the staff partners, and what that includes. So it's a general policy statement. The procedure manual is a lot more detailed. We try to keep it relatively straightforward in terms of the structure of it. So if you looked at the procedure manual, you saw that the first chunk focuses on the professional learning communities. The second chunk focuses on intersections. And the third chunk, which of course we also need, is how do we transition from the current structure that we have to the new structures that are being proposed. And so each one of those sections really tries to be very kind of succinct about, so how do you apply, how do you renew, and how do you dissolve? And we're trying to make those processes kind of predictable without being cumbersome. You'll see that in terms of the intersections, since that's the current structure that we have, both the intersections and the forums, the first question we pose to you is, which one of the structures fits your goals the best, either right now or as you aspire to in the future? So that will be the first question that you're going to ask yourself. So I'm going to not go through all of the details of that. I'm hoping that if you have any concerns or questions around that, that we can talk about that in kind of the questions and answer sections, because that's going to be really important to hear whether this makes sense, what we put out there, whether it makes sense to you. And so what I want to now go to is at least a tentative timeline as we are thinking about it right now, given these documents. So the first chunk of this, I want to say thank you to Sarah for putting this one together visually, beautifully, is to, in the first half, kind of summarizes the past, right? This is how we've gotten to today in terms of process. So we are now in July of 17. You saw that we shared the policy and the procedure manual with you. We have the town hall today, and I'm hoping that we're going to get some feedback, some alternative suggestions from you. We'll take that forward, make any adjustments that are needed to then come to a board vote at the October board meeting. And assuming that all goes through, then the first kind of deadline for you as leaders is that letter of intent that basically says, this is the type of community of practice that we are interested in. And that then puts you on, you know, either the PLN or the intersection type of community of practice track, if you will. Then around January, that transition documents from the intersection leaders or the forum leaders would be due to us. And then you can see that we continue the transition, have Chicago, where we'll do what we've always been doing. And then we instate the new structures of the communities of practice right after the convention. And then we move forward with implementing that for next year. And then the new, if there's the people might be interested in, for example, applying for a new community of practice that is not in existence yet, as of August of 2018. That sounds very overwhelming, but it is not. So I hope that that kind of helps at least kind of understand kind of where we came from, what our thinking has been along the way, that we really try to instill here a community of practices that are, if you will, forward, especially aspirational and forward-looking oriented, and that we are looking forward to working with all of you to kind of help everybody be in a community of practice for the type that makes sense to you, and how we can support your engagement in that type of community of practice. All right, so now that you have the basics, this is the time when I want to see what kind of questions you have. I know this was a reasonable amount of information that you had to process in a relatively short amount of time. And if there's any concerns or questions that we can think about, need to talk about, I'm looking forward to hearing from you now.
Hi, this is Nikki, and in looking at the procedure manual, I see that 20 members are necessary to establish an interest section, and I don't see any number a particular number of members necessary to establish the professional learning network. So is there no limit for that? It could just be like 2-3 people, or what's the thinking around that?
We did not want to put, because the PLNs are relatively easy to establish, we did not want to put too many constraints on that particular type of community of practice. We have, of course, other forms within the online community to do like quick things, like our TESOL lounge. But for people who really want to get together and say, we really want to be talking to one another around a specific issue, and it could be temporary, we didn't want to put too many constraints around that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think in the past, wasn't it a much higher number for intersections, like 50 people or 100 people? And I wonder if just, if 20 people is really enough to accomplish everything that the intersections have to accomplish, like the sessions at the conference and newsletters and all of that.
That's a good question. So would you suggest that we change that number, or would you suggest that as people apply as an intersection, that they're really clear on how those different responsibilities are being taken on?
Well, I wonder what other people think, what is a reasonable number to establish an intersection? Is 20 people enough?
This is Elke. I have a follow-up question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think in Seattle, we spoke about the number of people that when they join TESOL, what box they check as their primary interest section. Is that the number of people we're talking about here? You know what I mean? When people join, they have to check an interest section box that they're affiliated with. And our interest section, video and digital media, we have a lot of people who check this as secondary, but not so many people who check this as a first. That's what we're working on. Is this the number of members we're talking about, the 20, or is this a different number?
So this is a little bit, and I'm checking in with Sarah and Dudley on the other end too. This would be a little different because this would be for a new intersection. So for those people, I would imagine it would have to be at least initially a primary one.
Oh, okay. And for existing intersections,
for existing intersections, we don't have a number identified.
Okay, thank you.
So just to kind of follow up on that, whether it's in the initial application, I guess for a new one, I guess it'd be for the new ones. If I'm putting my name as one of those 20 people, does that mean that that's going to be my only intersection then, or?
No, I don't think. No, I don't think you can still be part of more than one intersection.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some clarification around that. Like Olga mentioned, are we talking about people who are choosing this intersection as their primary intersection, or just people who are interested in being involved in some way with this intersection?
I appreciate that. I think that's a really good clarification.
And the
And
whole
so-
idea of primary versus secondary intersection membership, if that's going to stay around or not, is another question.
Yes, I appreciate that. I think that's a great suggestion. So I want to circle back to Nikki's comment. There we go. That whether the group would think that 20 is sufficient or not.
Yes, hello. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Hello. Oh, thank you very much. I would like just to ask one question. The number of intersections is limited, is the same as walk, is less than that? Thank you.
So at this point, we are starting with the current intersections and ask you as intersection leaders to indicate which choice you would like to make. Whether as you're thinking about your activities and who you want to be, that a PLN type is a better match for your intersection, or if the kinds of things that would happen on an intersection, whether that makes the most sense to you. In principle, right now, there's not any notion of limiting or reducing the current number of intersections. At the same time, it seems that it may be a good opportunity to look around and say, do you have lots in common with other intersections? And does it actually make sense to become, for let's say, join forces, so to speak? Because you realize that you actually have a lot more in common than you might have before. At some point, but not right now, at some point it might be that the board has to say, given the resources that we have and the staff time that is necessary to really make sure that we have these vibrant communities, that we might not be able to add new ones right away, right? But this is not intended to say we have 21 right now, and by October or by March next year, we only want to have 15. So we could have all of the intersections. If all of you decide we all want to become or stay intersection, then we have 21 intersections as of March.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, just one more question. When should we decide for that? Till when? This I missed. Sorry.
That decision right now, just the decision would be due end of October.
Which one? October? No? October.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a decision. And
okay.
Then
thank you.
Once you, yeah.
Esther?
Yes.
This is Dudley.
Hey,
If I could just, hi. I think there's a really important shift that we want to make sure everyone is understanding, and that is, I think, when we had a lot of discussion in Seattle, there was a lot of questions around, what's the bar that we're going to have to meet in order to continue as an intersection. And the perception seemed to be, and I think we weren't very clear in communicating, that the end goal was to somehow weed out some intersections or reduce the resources that we were devoting to intersections. And I think for me, one of the biggest changes in what we're sharing now is trying to make it very clear that that's not the agenda. The agenda is that whatever communities have, they need to be vibrant, they need to be as much, self-directed, self-governing. And that's why, for example, we haven't put a lot of criteria around things like how many members. We've tried to take out references to numbers because somebody in Seattle made a really good point. The criteria should be vibrancy, not a magic number. And so that's why what we're looking for is Are you setting goals? Are you setting plans for activities? Can you assess your progress towards those goals? And those are the kinds of things that we're asking groups to do, because we think these are, just good principles for group management and keeping groups vibrant there. So
Thanks,
that's
Dudley.
my 2 cents.
No, thank you for adding that.
Just
Any
to go
other-
back to, sorry.
Hi.
Just to go back to Nikki's question about the 20 people. I mean, I think that seems appropriate. I think Nikki was asking about whether that's enough people to do the things that are going to be required in IS, like newsletters and those kinds of things. Just from reading this procedure manual, it kind of looks like the things that will be necessarily required of ISs are kind of being changed. From my reading of the document, it doesn't sound like newsletters are required. It's something that, if the IS says that that's something they want to do, then they have to have people that do it. It kind of looks like those things that are going to be required are going to be less, but that it's more about what the IS proposes that they will do.
Correct. And a newsletter is one mechanism, right, to share what we do. But I would imagine that intersections can come up with all kinds of other ways that you may choose to have much more regular webinars, for example, and that the newsletter might be useful for some intersections, but not as effective for other intersections, or PLNs for that matter.
Hi, this is Brian. I was just looking at the sort of the application to be a form of PLN, and I'm actually kind of the opinion that maybe there should be a minimum number of people, maybe like 5, in part because I can imagine 2 or 3 people trying to form a PLN, and I don't know how effective 2 or 3 people being a network would be. I mean, that's something they could just simply do on like a discussion forum or email amongst themselves, but kind of setting at least a minimum threshold to kind of make that a little bit more dynamic, to make it a little more engaging. And also, as a logistical thing, not be flooded with, a bunch of applications from like 2 or 3 people to form like a little group and have to weed through all of those little groups to get it formalized.
Well, I think what my thinking is that if you're being asked to have a formal application, at least like it's suggested, that would hopefully already kind of say, okay, if we're just going to be the 2 of us talking to each other, we don't have to go through this formal process. But that might be something to consider, again, without putting constraints on it, because I think the whole point of the PLN is to have that flexibility attached to it. Is that the consensus in the group, that the PLN, we might want to think about a number?
Olga Griswold here. I think it's one of those things that sometimes things start small. And I wouldn't want to put a minimum number on something. If 2 or 3 people have a brilliant idea and they want to start this process while they're reaching out to the community and broadening it, I think that would be useful. And I agree. I don't think if I just want to talk to, Nikki about teacher education and applied linguistics, we can just exchange emails. We're probably not going to go through a formal process. I think it's having the PLN will allow people with a solidified kind of idea to put the information out without having to have a minimum number at the outset.
Right.
It would be nice to have a place maybe also in the My Teasel where, with some information about new PLNs being formed. I think it's also something that would call people to join.
That's a good point. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else that stood out for you in this document that we need to consider?
Esther, it's Liz. I was going to just jump in here a sec and say that the Retirement Redefined Forum is doing something that I always have felt a little squeamish about. We have a very popular Facebook page that I put up kind of independently, and I post things about, I mean, it's the TESOL Retirement Redefined Forum page, in addition to the conference program that we have been running for over 10 years. So it might be timely to, I don't know, structure PLN communication, somehow. I mean, we're talking about different ways of doing it. Facebook's a very popular one with our constituency in the retirement group. And I know TESOL has a Facebook page too, but just to plug in that it's a popular way for people to learn about TESOL general, but our efforts with regard to this topic in particular. Thanks.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. At least to be thinking about.
So you emphasize that the intersection application process is for new intersections. So does that mean there will be a different process for the currently existing intersections, or that all of them have to apply as new intersections?
No, so that's where the transition piece comes in. So what we try to do in the procedure manual is to say, so if once we've gone through this transition, this is what it would look like. But then there's also the transition piece where we try to figure out, so how do we move from where we are now to where we're moving with these two types. So on page 5 of the procedure manual, you'll see transition to community of practices that will facilitate between now and then. So if you look at the first piece of that, talks about how do you transition from an intersection to a PLN. And so we basically ask folks by October 30th to let us know, do you want to remain an intersection or do you want to shift to a PLN? If you want to transition to an intersection, where are we? We would like you to simply say, this is our purpose of our statement of purpose. What are the goals for us for the coming years, and a summary of your planned activities for the year following. So you don't apply as a new one that doesn't exist yet intersection, because a new intersection, as in a brand new one that doesn't exist yet, would have to go through a very different kind of process that's outlined on page 2 that says, how do you apply for a new intersection? So there's a statement of purpose that we would want you to put in, but you're not going to be, we're not treating you as an intersection that doesn't exist yet.
Okay,
Would it be possible?
Does that make
Would
sense?
it be possible? Would it be possible to add one point here? How to transition a current one? What you just said as a written point for us.
Okay.
What we have to do.
Okay, that's not clear enough. Then we'll make sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the way it's worded there on page 5, page 5 and 6, it says new IS several times. Yeah. So that's what's confusing.
Gotcha. We'll clarify that. Thank you for pointing that out. But the idea is definitely now that it's, because a new intersection, if you will, has to go through this is what we want to establish, this is like a pre-proposal, and that whole process. And we would not want you guys to do that. So we'll make sure that we clarify that for, if you are a current intersection, this is and you want to remain one, this is what it looks like. Okay. Then another question, I just want to make sure that we are looking at the same thing while I look at this, is the question that, where are we? Olga just said about intersections.
Oh, I was responding to Ryan.
Okay, great. Ryan, what is your concern there?
Oh, I was just noticing in the section about ISs, this is on page 3, it says that ISs will be provided a non-adjudicated academic session in the convention program and a non-adjudicated collaborative session with one or more other TESOL entities. That wording makes it sound like ISs will only be allowed to participate in one intersection, which is not the case as it is right now. ISs can sponsor one of their own, but can participate in as many as they want. I didn't know if this is a change from the current structure. Or not. Yeah.
Brian, this is Dudley. I think the intent is to keep it the same.
Okay.
And the way it's structured, I mean, if you had to write up the current policy, it would be that you have your academic session, and then you can lead one intersection, right?
Right.
Well, this is the same, right?
Right.
You can. We just didn't say lead one collaborative session. Maybe that's what we should have done.
That might be a good change. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
But we're just saying, yeah. So you're guaranteed a non-adjudicated session, academic session, and a non-adjudicated collaborative session. So it's the intent is to keep it the same.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, just some different wording there might be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that on that third bullet point or that fourth bullet point, maybe it needs to be a non-adjudicated academic session and non-adjudicated collaborative sessions. Like that should be, that the second part should be plural.
Well, but each IS will be allowed to have their own main one.
Right. So it's the idea is that you can organize your academic session and you can organize a collaborative session. All right, as the lead. And that's the way it is currently. Right?
So,
but it doesn't say how many you can, it doesn't put any limits on how many you can participate in.
So we need to clarify that. So I think that's a really good point to make sure that that part is consistent with current practice.
Also in that same bullet point where it says one or more other TESOL entities, so does this mean only within the TESOL International Association, or is this also with like ILTEFL or other organizations? I know like 2 years ago, TEIS did an intersection panel with the self-study and teacher education practice intersection or SIG from AERC or AERA, sorry, AERA. So like I just want to clarify when it says one or more other TESOL entities, what exactly does that mean?
Oh. I think, and Dudley, correct me if I'm wrong, I think our initial thinking around that was other intersections, but I don't think this would prevent you from doing that at all, if that's what the intersection would like to do.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think the reason the reference is to TESOL entities is actually to have a more sort of expansive notion of collaboration, so that it can be with another intersection, it could be with a professional council there. So.
This is Leslie.
Go ahead, Leslie.
I was just going to say, I know last year what came up was the that any kind of community of practice. So it would be another intersection or a forum or the new iteration of forum, because they will not get their own sessions anymore, like the retirement forum and the other forums no longer will have a guaranteed slot if they want them. Is that right? That's what I understood from reading it.
Well, the forums will be given a choice to either to go the PLN route or the intersection route. So if they go the intersection route, they have access to all of the things that all the other intersections have access.
Right. But the PLNs won't have access to them. Won't, but they could join be invited by an intersection for a non-adjudicated session that the intersection is arranging. Is that correct?
So let me just make sure that I understand, Leslie. You think that if the forum chooses to become a PLN, could they connect up with an intersection for this purpose?
I think that's one of the things, I thought that was said in March, that one of the reasons that it was any other TESOL entity was that it might be that an intersection connects up with a PLN to form a session or a professional council or something else.
Right. Yeah, I see no reason why that could not happen. So maybe what we need to say is to make sure that we kind of either list those entities to make sure people understand that it is this broader notion of collaboration, but also clarify that it could be a related entity outside of TESOL as an association, like what Nikki was proposing. I don't think the goal is to limit collaboration across shared interests. I think that's one of the richest parts of the intersections. I think they're wonderful. So we'll work a little bit on that bullet to make sure. I appreciate, so we need to kind of clarify the different entities and potential collaborations outside of TESOL as well. So TESOL might be a little bit confusing there too. So that bullet we'll work on. I'm aware of the time, so any other, I think this is great. So what I have right now, just to kind of recap.
Esther,
Yes.
Liz has posted a question on the chat, and I think we need to be real clear about the forums and what so we've talked a lot about transitions for intersections, but we also need to understand what the transition process for forums is.
Right. So, and I think, Dudley, this is a conversation you've already had with some of the forum leaders. So one of the things that we thought was really important is that right now the forums operate kind of on their own, connected to TESOL, but also very disconnected to TESOL. So what we thought, given especially the interests that the forums represent, that it was really important to make our communities of practice structure much more inclusive of all of the different entities that we have. So just like we will ask all of the intersections to say which community of practice type makes sense to you, we're going to do the same. We propose to do the same thing for the forums and say, let's not have yet another structure that's outside of the regular structure, but let's have two types of communities of practices. And so the forums is the proposal. We would give the exact same choice. We talked about just becoming PLNs, and that certainly is an option. But then the question became, well, can a forum ever become an intersection? And we thought about that and said, well, why not? If a forum wants to function like an intersection, why could they not apply for intersection status, if you will, and do the kinds of things that intersections do and become that kind of community of practice? So exactly, Ryan, thank you. So just like the intersections, the forums will have the exact same choice. We didn't see a compelling reason to say you can only be one or the other. It may make more sense to be a PLN. It may be that the forums say, no, we aspire to be like an intersection. And so we felt it was important to have that choice available. And so the forums fall within the transition plan the exact same way, and maybe we need to clarify that if that's not really clear. So they also will be asked by October to say which of the ones are you aspiring to become. Does that clarify a little bit, Liz? Right.
I forgot to push the button. I'm sorry.
No, quite okay. Quite okay.
I'm talking to myself. Yeah, I think it's clearer, but just so my question is answered straight, sort of, so I have an answer to the question. Forums will be renamed PLNs, one of two types of what you're calling communities of practice, and those will still be in the program, unadjudicated.
Not for the PLN.
What?
Not for the PLN. The PLNs don't have a space on the program.
The convention program.
The convention program.
Yeah, the convention program. PLNs, or in our case, the retirement forum, will not have a place on the program.
If the forum chooses to become a PLN, correct?
Oh, that wasn't clear at all. So we have to somehow pretend we're in an intersection? I don't understand, sorry.
No, you don't have to pretend to be. I think what we want the forums to do is really think about the kind of community of practice they are and they would want to be, and then indicate how you would engage as a community of practice, whether you engage in the form of a PLN or whether you engage in the form of an intersection. And they operate a little bit differently,
Right.
with different sets of expectations around that.
Esther, could I say something? This is Sylvia. To Liz, I might be wrong here, and sorry if I'm mistaken, but forums don't have non-adjudicated sessions now, do they?
Yes, they do.
They do? Sorry, my bad. Okay.
Liz, actually, that's been changing. And so for Seattle, the forums had to submit a proposal. It was reviewed. They were all accepted. And Chris may want to comment on the process that's been set up for Chicago. I think what I would caution everybody against is this notion of renaming. And that going forward, we're looking at two kinds of groups within the association. I think that the PLN is not just a new name for forums, because the PLN actually will be more visible to TESOL members than our current forums. You can't find a list of forums anywhere on the association website. The only place you can find it is actually in the convention program. Going forward, we've got an opportunity for a group to have visibility on the association website and in the form of an electronic group. But there isn't a guaranteed convention program slot for that group.
So Dudley and Esther and everyone, is there a way for us, that is forum leaders, or to have a discussion on this topic in Chicago? Can we have a time on the program so we can have a kind of business meeting to collect input on how we would move forward in the new structure?
Well, I think this is part of why we have the town meeting right now, to kind of see what some of the issues are and what exactly are the issues that still need to be resolved, right? So we can certainly have another conversation with the forums around this to kind of see what needs to happen, but I don't think we want to wait all the way to Chicago for that. But it's not to say that the conversation has to stop at this point, right? That's why we're having the town hall, to make sure that we hear kind of what in the current proposal, what are the questions that are being raised, what are the ways that we can talk about them and resolve them as needed. So what I'm hearing, and again, it's 11:30. So what I'm hearing right now is, one, we need to be a lot clearer to sort through some of the issues still related to the forums and the implications. We want to clarify the primary and secondary membership of intersections. We want to make sure that we address that third bullet around the intersections, make sure it's really clear kind of what does and does not happen related to the convention, and that we make clear in the transition plan, both the transition for forums, but also the transition for the current intersections. If there's any other pieces, and I know that we're getting to the end here, is there any other pieces that you want to make sure that as we continue to revise and refine this proposal that we need to address, talk about, please send me an email to, whoa, I need to do that right here. Please send an email with whatever the concern is. If you have a potential solution that you think might work, please add that to it. I want to thank each one of you for attending this town hall and really raising some key issues that we need to sort through. This is not, I mean, the proposal will be up and it's accessible to you. And so if there's anything else that you want to make sure that the board pays attention to, please, please, please let us know as soon as you can. But I want to thank you all. And we'll follow up, that's for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.